Good morning everyone. Myself Shulil Hosmani, lecturer. Yesterday session we have learnt about the definition of yarn, properties of yarn. Today's session is the second session, fabric structure. Subject code is 15 FT 3040. First unit yarn. It is a third sem subject. Today's is second session. First session, you know the two important properties of the yarn: fineness, its fineness, and the amount of twist it has. So you have to remember this fineness and the amount of the twist given to that yarn. What is the definition of yarn? You have learnt yesterday. That is, yarn is defined by the American Society for Testing Materials, that is ASTM. According to this, yarn is a generic term for continuous strand of textile fibers, filaments, or material in a form suitable for knitting, weaving, or otherwise intertwining to form a textile fabric. So, according to this ASTM, yarn is a generic term which is used for, that is a continuous strand of textile fibers, filaments, or the materials which is suitable for fabric construction method by using some of the methods like knitting, weaving, braiding, etc. More the twist in the yarn, finer, smoother and stronger it is. So, if the twists are more, that yarn performs a finer texture and the smoother and stronger it is. Types of, so after the definition, what are the classification of the yarns? That is, types of yarns are classified into three types: simple yarns, complex or novelty yarns, textured yarns. So yarns are classified into three groups. You have to remember this flow chart. First, simple yarns, novelty yarns, and the processed yarns. Here, simple yarns, under simple yarns, the simple yarns are classified into single yarn, ply yarn, cable yarn, double yarn. So simple yarns again are classified into four groups: single yarn, ply yarn, cable yarn, double yarn. These are the simple yarns. Next one is the novelty yarns. What are the novelty yarns? Slurb yarn, flake yarn, spiral yarn, rattan yarn, buckle yarn, nub yarn, and the chenille yarn. So these comes under novelty yarns. These are used for the creating the decorative or the fancy effect. Next is the processed yarns. What are the processed yarns? Bleached yarn, dyed yarn, mercerized yarn, knitting yarn, sewing thread, embroidery thread. These comes under processed yarns. So how the yarns are classified? Yarns are classified into three groups, that is simple yarn, novelty and the processed yarns. Under simple, again there are four types, that is single yarn, ply yarn, cable yarn, double yarn. You have to remember under which group which yarn comes. So simple yarns, four groups. Novelty yarns again classified into slurb, flake, spiral, rattan, buckle, nub yarn, and the chenille yarn. After that processed yarns, under processed yarn, bleached yarn, depending upon the type of the processing given, they are classified into bleached yarn, dyed yarn, mercerized yarn, knitting yarn, sewing thread, and the embroidery thread. You have to remember this flow chart of the classification. Simple yarns. So under simple yarns, four groups, as you know: the single, ply, cable, and the double yarn. What are the simple yarns then? A yarn which is smooth and uniform and evenly twisted is called a simple yarn. What is a simple yarn then? Simple yarn is a smooth and uniform and evenly twisted throughout their length. That yarn is known as the simple yarn. It is commonly used for making fabric like poplin and the cambric. These simple yarns are that is used for the fabric constructions like fabrics like poplin and the cambric. Simple yarns are further classified into four groups. Next, single yarn, ply yarn, cable yarn, and the double yarn. This comes under simple yarns. These are the diagram of the simple yarns. That is ply yarn, cable, and the single yarn. What about the complex yarns? That is novelty yarns. Complex yarns are the uneven yarns which may be thick and thin or have curls, loops, twists and even differently colored areas along their length. So complex yarns. Earlier slide you discussed about the simple yarns. Simple yarns are uniform in length, evenly twisted, so smooth. These are simple yarns. But in the complex or the novelty yarns, they are uneven yarns, thick and thin, and they have the curls, loops and the twist, even differently colored areas along their length. So this comes under complex yarns. Due to this fancy look of the yarn, they are used to add interesting effects in the fabrics. Because of this loop effect, curl or the twist, uneven, thick and the thin and different color, they give the interesting effects on the fabrics. So these are used to create the interesting effect, means that is the fancy or the ornamental effect on the fabric by using the novelty or the complex yarns. Which are the novelty yarns then? Slub yarn, knot yarn, spiral yarn, bocal yarn, flake yarn, rattan yarn, chenille yarn. This comes under novelty yarns. You have to remember all these yarns. These are the diagram: slub, flake, chenille, rattan, spiral yarns. You have to remember all these. Next is the processed yarn. According to the process given to the yarn after the manufacturing of the yarn, that is, if the yarn is treated with the bleaching powder, that is a bleaching process, that yarn after the bleaching, that yarn is known as the bleached yarn. Next, dyed yarn, mercerized yarn. If the yarn is used for the knitting purpose, that is known as a knitting. For example, woolen. Sewing thread, we are using many types of varieties of the sewing threads and embroidery thread. So yarns, uses of yarns, this comes under this. According to the process given, they are named after that process. Like for example, after bleaching, that yarn is known as a bleached yarn. You have to remember all these processed yarns. So you have discussed what are the classifications, how the yarns are classified according to their construction and the method of and the uses for the end use. They are classified into 3 groups. So you have to remember that flow chart and subdivision of those 3 groups. First one is the, you have to choose the multiple choice questions. Bocal yarn is a dash yarn. Under which group the bocal yarn belongs? First option is simple yarn. Second, processed yarn. C, novelty yarn. D, textured yarn. Under which group it comes? Bocal, simple. So under simple, only 4 groups, that is single, ply, cable and the double yarn. So bocal knot comes under simple yarns. Processed yarns, after giving the processings, that is bleaching, mercerization, dyeing. So this bocal is not a processing, that is not comes under this novelty. Yes, novelty bocal. Loops effect is created on the yarn, that bocal. So this yarn belongs to the novelty yarn. Correct option is C. Bleached yarn is a dash yarn. Simple yarn, processed yarn, novelty yarn, textured yarn. So bleached yarn, as the name indicates, bleaching. So bleaching is what? It is simple yarn. No, simple is it is not a processing. It's in simple, processing is not done uniformity and the strength. Processed yarn, it is the right answer is the B, that is option B, processed. Bleached yarn is a processed yarn. Dyed yarn is a dash yarn. So dyed yarn comes under which group? That is simple. First option is simple yarn. B, processed yarn. C, novelty yarn. D, textured yarn. Under which group the dyed yarn belongs? So simple, no, answer is not correct. B, processed, yes, it is a dyeing is a processing given to that, and after dyeing that yarn is known as the dyeing yarn. So B is the correct answer. Next one is the ply yarn. Ply yarn is a dash yarn. Ply yarn comes under which group? Whether the simple, first one is simple, second B option is processed, C, novelty, D, textured. So simple, and the simple, it is a ply yarn belongs to the simple answer. The right answer is the A, choice A. So answers, first C is the correct option, second one B, third one B, fourth one A. So these are the answers for those questions. In the same way, you have to fill up the blanks. That first one, spiral yarn is a dash yarn. Second, ply yarn is a dash yarn. Third, double yarn is a dash yarn. Flake yarn is a dash yarn. Knot yarn is a dash yarn. Single yarn is a dash yarn. You have to, after knowing that those, you have remembered. So you have to remember that flow chart. If you remember that flow chart, you can easily answer or fill up these blanks. Answers for these questions: spiral yarn is a novelty yarn. Answer is novelty. Ply yarn is a single yarn. Double yarn is a single yarn. Simple yarn, sorry, simple. Flake yarn is a novelty yarn. Knot yarn is a novelty yarn. Single yarn is a simple yarn. So right answer is simple yarn.